Ladies and gentlemen, this is the 12th and final round.
Right hand, Golovkin steps in and down he goes again. Unbelievable. Mayweather makes him pay. What a rookie mistake. A sensational left hook by De La Hoya.
It's facts. I'm the best. You know what I mean? Sometimes I don't want to believe it myself, but it's the truth. I'm the best.
I'm going to show you how great I am.
From Southern California, this is the Last Round Podcast.
Welcome back to this week's episode of the Last Round Podcast. Thanks again for listening, whether you're on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Boxing Social, wherever you're at, however you're listening. We appreciate it. I just got back. I was telling Mike off air, I just got back not too long ago from the Fury Wilder 3 press conference in downtown Los Angeles. And then we were also talking about the heat. Seems like the big heat wave across this country right now, especially over here on the West Coast. But speaking of West Coast, we have another West Coast reoccurring guest here on the Last Round. He's back, I believe, maybe fourth, fifth time. I don't know. He's in our rotation of consistent guests, and we definitely appreciate that. Yahoo Sports, Kevin Iole joins us again here on the Last Round. Thanks again for joining us, Kevin.
Absolutely. You had a fun press conference today, didn't you?
Yeah. It was
different.
It was definitely interesting. I could definitely see that. You know, since we're on that topic, let's start with that July 24th initial press conference. It's going to be the only press conference they're going to have for the fight, and it's obviously, I believe, a partnership again between ESPN and Fox pay-per-view. I'm sure all the listeners know that Wilder didn't really speak too many words. He said like one brief statement. He didn't take any questions. Malik Scott, his new trainer, answered all the questions for him, went back and forth with Fury. Did you get a chance to watch it live, Kevin? And if you did,
yes,
what was your reaction as you were watching it?
You know, I wrote a column. I mean, the thing is, I disagree with a lot of my colleagues, right? A lot of my colleagues, their sense is Wilder owes this. He has to do the promotion. He has to talk. I don't believe that's the case, right? I think, hey, you know what? Your obligation is to fulfill your contract, which was to show up at the event. He did what he had to do, right? By showing up. I mean, I think it would have served him better to show up, and because he made all these wild accusations, and he denied things. Like I put a little clip on the internet because I had all these people telling me, they're calling me a liar, saying that Wilder didn't say the suit was too heavy for him that he wore to the cage, the ring last time. And I got tired of being called a liar when I had, the interview on tape. So I put a little clip of it out, and he made, that was a minor thing that he said, but, he made all these accusations about Mark Breland and Fury, cheating and all. So, I think this is your chance to either prove those allegations or just put it to rest. But I mean, he went out there and not talking. So I think it was a lost opportunity on his part, but I don't get offended by it. I mean, I've seen it many times over the years, and I understand why he didn't want to talk. He was really bothered by the reaction. I think he's a proud guy, and he lost a fight that he didn't expect to lose, and he lost it in a manner that he never expected to lose in. I get it.
You mentioned, Kevin, how some of your colleagues, some of the other media colleagues in the sport of boxing have a differing opinion than you in terms of that he should have spoke. He came to the press conference. We all came out. He should have gave us something. I mean, I was there, like I mentioned, I was there live. I did hear some of those rumblings as I was there, as I was walking around. I mean, the main thing is, I was talking to actually one person who said, like, well, the allegations that he was throwing out over the last several months about everything you just mentioned, Kevin, like he needs to defend those. Like, he's here, he has all of us. Like, why not talk to us? But you believe, like you mentioned, Kevin, that he doesn't need to. He just needs to show up and then show up on fight night, right?
I think it would have been good of him to do it, right? I think it would have been wise of him. It would have helped him had he done it. And he could have cleared up any, misconceptions that are out there about what he actually meant, when he said what he said. Like, I know at one point he was alleging that he didn't say the things that he said to me. Now, I should say this, I talked to him the Monday after he fought, Danny, And so I was the first person he talked to after, in the media, and, after the fight. So it was Monday afternoon. But I was the first of about 7 or 8 reporters he talked to right in a row. I did a one-on-one interview with him. Tim Smith of the PBC was the one that connected the call, so it was the 3 of us together. And I was no idea that he was going to blame the suit, right? And I said, Deontay, what happened to you? That did not seem like the Deontay Wilder I've seen in the past. And he said, oh, honestly, my suit was too heavy. And I'm like, what? And if you saw me that time, you can hear it in my voice. I was like shocked. He repeated it, and then the whole conversation went that way. I quoted him. I took great care to quote it accurately. And then he went out and said that he didn't say it. And then so then when I put the audio out that he did say it, then, the story changed. But there was stuff that Breland spiked his water and that Tyson was altering the gloves and, all these different things. And so I think that's an opportunity for him to go out there and address everything. This is why I got rid of Mark Breland. This is what I believe happened, and end it. Because now it's just going to go on. He's going to get asked this all on and on and on. It's, even if it's not asked by media people in a scrum like we would like to do, it's going to get asked by the broadcasters of the fight because it's a factor in the fight. And I think you could put it all behind you by answering it now, 6 weeks out from the fight, and nobody, at that point, then you can say, I've said my piece about it. I'm leaving it alone. I only want to take questions about the fight. But by not talking, he hurts himself. But he doesn't have an obligation to talk, is what I'm saying. If he chooses not to talk, he fulfilled his contract by showing up. And he did talk because he got up on the mic and he said not much and didn't answer any questions. But he fulfilled the contract. And I think that's what's key. I think Bob Arum, you were there, so you heard Bob Arum say he thought it was going to be a bigger pay-per-view than the last time. If you got one of the fighters not talking and you're coming off a fight where it was a one-sided ass beating, I think it's going to be hard to sell that to more people unless, you get Wilder out there explaining why the fight's going to be different. But when he doesn't do that, I think it's going to hurt the business.
Kevin, do you think that one of the reasons that Deontay didn't really want to take questions is there's that many excuses and they're that outlandish that I don't think you could reasonably come out with an excuse for each one without really digging yourself into a deeper hole? Because obviously, Breland poisoned him, the suit, the gloves, so on and so forth. I don't think you could reasonably come out with a good excuse for each one.
Yeah, no, but I think you can answer it. You can just say, hey, I was frustrated at the time. I don't know what he really believes, right? So the first thing is none of us know what he really believes. But let's say he's gone past that and doesn't believe that anymore. He could say, hey, look, I was frustrated. I didn't have any answers. I was trying to figure out what happened. And I said these things. And, to anybody I offended, I apologize. If he does believe them, if he does believe Mark Breland, put stuff in his water or, that Fury altered the gloves or whatever, then explain how it happened and didn't get detected, right? He took a post-fight drug test and, if something was put in his water, that would show up in the water, but it did not show up, so where does this conspiracy end? I like Deontay. I've liked Deontay for a long time. But I think he made a mistake in the way he handled that loss and in the way he's been going forward now. I think he's a good guy, but I think he's misguided in the way he's handling.
Kevin, Deontay Wilder, he didn't do any interviews at the press conference. He left, and Malik Scott stayed, and he actually did quite a few interviews. He actually gave us a lot, but he did do one interview with Ellie Segbeck of ES News in his hotel room. I don't know if you had a chance to see it, but I've seen a couple clips, and he did address. He called them the allegations that they said he was depressed and he was going through a dark period after the loss and everything. And he singled out the American media and said, how come they could just call me? A lot of them have my number. They have my team's number. Why don't they just call me and ask me? He's like, that none of that never happened. He was pretty much pushing back against all those I guess allegations. That's what he calls them. They were thrown at him in regards to depression, and he was kind of feeling really low. Obviously, like you mentioned, you've spoken to him. You're one of the first people to speak to him after that. And he blamed it on the suit, or he mentioned concerns about the suit. since we live kind of in an era of social media for actually the last several years, and with sources, people saying, oh, sources say this, sources say that, or I'm hearing this. I mean, how easy is it to get in contact with somebody of the caliber of a Deontay Wilder to verify a story like that from your experience?
Well, I'll just say this. Like, the last time I spoke to him was the Monday after the fight. That was the Fury fight, February 22nd. So I talked to him, February 24th, 2020. I have never spoken to him since. I have sent him text messages. I have sent him private messages on Twitter, sent him private messages on Instagram. I've talked to his publicist, Tim Smith of Heyman Boxing. I talked to his manager, Shelley Finkel. Did not want to talk, was not interested in, in any conversation. Now, I never reported some of the stuff that you said, right? Depression, whatever, right. Because I that's a pretty serious subject. And unless you have evidence and it's true, you don't report something like that. And I think that's a failing of our modern media, because so many people get to be considered media that that are just really fans with a camera, that the standard that those of us who are professional and try to do things the right way get held to those people who aren't. And I think there's a distinction to be made, but in any event, like, I've never reported that. So I don't agree with anybody who said that, because I've seen no evidence presented that Deontay had anything mentally wrong with him. I mean, you could speculate, but that's like, we're not amateur psychologists, and that's not our job to do that.
I'm sure, like you mentioned, Kevin, you were watching the event live today. Tyson Fury and Malik Scott were going at it. And Fury said that, and I'm summarizing here, but how he said that, how can Malik Scott train Deontay Wilder to be better when he wasn't even a good fighter? So, that's what kind of Fury was saying. And then Malik Scott,
which is ridiculous.
Yeah. So and then Malik Scott goes back and he mentions Sugar Hill, who is Fury's trainer, and says, like, well, he wasn't a good fighter either. How you're pretty much doing the same thing. What do you think about that little exchange when you were watching it?
I mean, I thought Malik Scott handled himself very well at the press conference today, and I thought Fury was way wrong on that. I mean, look, Freddie Roach is the greatest example of that. Freddie Roach was not a very good fighter, not a world champion. He's, what is he, 6-time or 7-time trainer of the year? One of the greatest trainers who ever lived, and certainly not a great fighter. You don't have to be a good fighter to be. In fact, a lot of times it hurts guys, because they can do things naturally that the rest of the fighters can't do, and that they need to be taught and learn. And, so they have expectations that the other fighters can't match. So I think Fury was just trying to take jabs at Wilder more than anything else. I don't think it was anything more than that. I don't think he was making a serious point, because I think if somebody went up to Tyson at a neutral time when there was no fight and brought that up to him, he would say, of course, that's the case, right? The guys can, be good trainers and not have. So I think he was just trying. Tyson's always playing the mind game and trying to get into somebody's head, and I think he was trying to get into Deontay's head there, or Malik's, or both. And I don't think he succeeded. Certainly, Deontay was listening to music; he wasn't listening to Tyson, and I think Malik handled himself very well.
So we saw one of the longest face-offs I think we've ever seen in combat sports. I was asking people who were sitting next to me, and in the seats, and even after the whole press conference was over, as they were cleaning up. But is there a record for the longest face-off we've ever seen in combat sports? I mean, like, you're the guy to ask.
I can't remember seeing one longer than that, honestly. Like, I'm thinking of some of the, nobody ever wants to be the one to break focus, right, and blink, so to speak. And I've never seen one go longer. I actually started to get a little worried because I thought there was going to be a fight, because once the teams came up, and there was somebody on Fury's team that was behind him, and they start chirping, and it's like, you're behind the fighter, so you feel brave and you can talk, right? But then everybody comes together, and that can create a bad scene. And at one point when the security guards came around, you heard Wilder say, "Don't touch me." and so there's like, what are the security guards going to do to try to break this up? So I was a little worried, I thought something bad was going to happen, that, everybody was going to start fighting on that stage. And one of the fighters, hey, if those other idiots start fighting and they get hurt, God bless them, that's on them. But you don't want to see the two fighters get hurt. And that I was a little worried. Or somebody like Bob Arum, who's 90 years old, right? Or, Christina Poncher, a new mother who's right there in the middle of that mix. But you hate to see that kind of stuff happen, but fortunately it went. But I have never seen that before myself.
Yeah, it was definitely interesting to watch. We were all sitting there watching, like, they're still going. This isn't going to stop. But it was definitely a sight to behold. You mentioned Bob Arum, Kevin. Some of us, so actually some of my colleagues in the media were asking him about obviously the Eddie Hearn, AJ debacle, before the arbitration case, and, trying to get to the bottom of, what happened from Bob Arum and Top Rank side. I have a little recording about a minute or so long. I want to play it for you and then,
sure.
And then get your reaction on what he says. Okay.
Like, how did we end up with this fight when the undisputed fight was so close?
Well, the undisputed fight was close as not a cigar. The problem is Eddie Hearn was screwing around with the deal that he was trying to make with the Saudis, and it went on months and months and months, because instead of just making a sight deal, give us some money and we'll bring over the fight, he sold them, tried to sell them all of the rights, all of the television rights. And they aren't fools. They had to do due diligence. They had to check what the split. They didn't know that the cable companies got a big piece of it. They didn't know anything. So they had to learn it back and forth. And then there was Ramadan. And we went nowhere. And meanwhile, the arbitration was limping along, and the judge decided the case for them. I don't necessarily think it was right, but the judge decided. But he would have, in my opinion, not enjoined Tyson from fighting Joshua if the fight had been signed, but it hadn't been signed.
What's your reaction to Bob Arum saying that Eddie Hearn, was trying to give all the TV rights to the Saudis, and it seemed like Eddie Hearn wasn't.
Well, I think Bob, there was a lot there that I disagree with, right? And Bob sometimes fires and without, thinking about what he's saying. But there's contractual obligations in these fights that you can't give away the TV rights. That's not Eddie Hearn's to give away. So he couldn't have done that, right? So that, was ridiculous. And Eddie wasn't screwing around. And remember, Bob is a promoter of this fight too. He's promoter of Tyson Fury. And he could have been out there trying to get a site. He could have been trying to get somebody to invest. You're talking about $150 million site fee, which is a record. And it takes a long time to get that on board and get that down. And I think, Bob could have certainly gone out there and tried to find a site fee, but he wasn't doing it. So it's easy to criticize Eddie Hearn. Eddie Hearn has the other guy, the rival, and it's easy to make him the bad guy. I don't think there's really a bad guy in this. I think what happened was, you had two tracks. On the one hand, Bob and his lawyers are telling him that you're going to win the arbitration, so don't worry that, you're in the right. And on the other hand, he's trying to get the fight done. The two sides are trying to get the fight done between Fury and Joshua. But you have that, Wilder's going forward with his case. So I think there's these two separate tracks. And, if it wasn't such a rich fight, I think the deal would have gotten done sooner. And then, like Bob said, that's one part I agree with. It probably would have happened. But because of the way the situation unfolded, and you're looking for absolute top dollar in that fight, and I'm not saying I'm blaming him for that. I think that he's doing his job. It makes it difficult. So, I think for Bob to blame Eddie Hearn is a little bit ridiculous. And I guess I'll leave it at that.
If the fight would have been signed, a Fury-Joshua unification fight, hypothetically speaking, and Wilder comes in with the arbitration decision, would that nullify their contract? Would that void it? And would he have to go with Wilder even if there was signed contracts already?
Well, I'm not a lawyer, right? So I'll just play one here right now. But I mean, I think the way I understand this decision was that, and remember, Wilder and Fury had a contract before that was signed and executed before Fury and Joshua. So, unless Wilder was willing to make some concession, I think his contract, came first because it was signed first, and there was clauses that the judge ruled were valid. To me, that's just makes sense, right? People forget, on that they fought the first time in 2018 when they signed the rematch. What the rematch clause was for 2 fights, not 1 fight. And the only out that they put in is if the loser didn't want it, then he could turn down the option. But otherwise, the rematch was automatically on. And Wilder, as the loser, exercised the option, said, I do want the fight. I'm not turning it down. So that was his right. I think what happened is Tyson got impatient when the COVID was preventing them from getting a site for the third fight. They just couldn't get a site that would pay because, you can't have fans. And, in Nevada, like you can use the gaming as a thing, they couldn't, the hotels were closed. So there was nothing that they could do. So I think Tyson got impatient and, said, I want to forget Wilder. I want to go forward with Joshua. And that's what they did. But I think that kind of put them behind the 8 ball because I'm sure, without knowing, I'm sure the lawyer said, Tyson, this is a risk that we're taking. And he said, screw it. I want to go.
Have you heard anything about this trilogy fight between Fury and Wilder? Is there an agreement contractually for a 4th fight depending on the winner?
Nothing. So once they're done, so they fulfilled their obligation on this fight, July 24th at 10 o'clock Pacific time on that night. The fight's over, and then they're done with each other. So each guy can go whichever way he wants to go. I'm assuming whoever becomes the champion that night will end up talking to Anthony Joshua and trying to get the fight with Anthony Joshua next, but they have no more obligation to each other.
Kevin, which one do you think is the trickiest matchup? Obviously, we have Fury, Wilder, and it's looking like Joshua probably against Usyk in September.
Yeah, it's interesting. I like Usyk. I think he's a good boxer, but I was really disappointed in his fight with Chaz Witherspoon, right? And maybe I'm making too much of that, but I looked at it, and Chaz Witherspoon is years past his prime. What was he, 40 years old? And he gave Usyk problems, and I would have never guessed it. And so to me, that said, hey, a motivated Joshua will be able to handle him. Had I not seen that Chaz Witherspoon fight, I might have even picked Usyk to upset Joshua because I thought, such a good boxer and he's a smart guy and everything. But I saw that and it looked like he was having difficulty handling a heavyweight. Even though he ended up winning the fight fairly handily, he had some moments in the fight that were tricky. So, I think like you look at Wilder and Fury and you say, okay, Fury won 7 rounds the first time. He won all 7 rounds the last time. So they fought 19 rounds and Fury won 14 of the 19 rounds. So you got to think he's a big, heavy favorite to win again. The trickier one would be Joshua and Usyk, but then that Witherspoon kind of haunts me there watching that. It's hard for me to want to pick Usyk when I see what happened with Witherspoon.
Kevin, were you impressed with his performance against the very one-dimensional and predictable Chisora? I give him a lot of credit for that win, right? You knew what you were getting into, and hey, God bless him for that. I thought he fought a good fight, better than he fought against Chaz Witherspoon. But to me, he showed vulnerability in that fight against Witherspoon that I think I follow in the back of my mind, right? You're talking, Anthony Joshua was bigger, stronger, more athletic and more physical than either Witherspoon or Chisora. And I saw how he struggled, to move Witherspoon. And I'm going, how is he going to compete with Anthony Joshua if he's having that trouble? The Chisora fight, more power to him, and I give him credit for that. But I kind of felt like that Witherspoon fight just scared me.
let's just say Wilder ends up winning this next fight,
which he could do,
obviously. And he tries to make a fight with Anthony Joshua for the unification, the unified titles. Would you see that fight possibly happening in the UK because Anthony Joshua is a bigger draw over there, like in a stadium? Or obviously everybody knows that it's more bang for your buck over here in the United States. So that's why a lot of the big fights happen in Vegas and places like that. Or could you see hypothetically that fight happening over here in the States?
I could see it happening in the Middle East again, right? I mean, Eddie Hearn has a good relationship with the people over there. They're willing to pay top dollar. If you're talking about $150 million site fee, it's going to be hard for any casino in Nevada to match that, right? Especially now, right? I mean, a couple of years ago, that might have been when everything was rolling, but Nevada really took a hit over the last year. I mean, Nevada is one of the hardest hit states from COVID. And the casino industry, and the hospitality industry really is in bad shape. So it's going to take a while to get out of that. When we had the crash in 2008, it was a number of years, before they got back up. And so they're not going to be able to offer that kind of, what they're going to be able to offer, Joshua versus the winner, assuming, that's what the fight is they're going to say, we can have an all-in-one experience. We have all the infrastructure to put everybody in, if we fight at T-Mobile Arena, we're right across the street from, all the hotels where everybody's going to be. We're used to big events. We have all that being done. That's what they're going to go. And we can pay you big money. Also, it's going to help the pay-per-view because they're going on in primetime in the U.S. Now, this is one of the few pay-per-views, guys, that the UK pay-per-view is going to be the driver if it's Fury and Joshua. If it's Wilder and Joshua, I think it'll be the American pay-per-view that will be the driver of the thing. But if it's Fury and Joshua, I talk to people over there, and they really believe they get $2.5-3 million on pay-per-view. That is going to be a massive number, and I'll do what the U.S. number does. So, but if it's Wilder and Joshua, I think it'll be more of a U.S. based fight, and I wouldn't be surprised to see them fight at the Garden or here in Las Vegas.
Yeah, definitely going to be interesting to see how it all plays out now that we have that fight set up on July 24th, and then the likely Usyk and Anthony Joshua fight in the coming months as well.
September 25th on that one.
Is that a confirmed date?
Yeah, September 25th at Tottenham Hotspur soccer stadium.
Nice. So there we go. So now we're just going to have to wait until after September to see where the chips fall. Moving on, we talked about this just off air, but before we started recording, Kevin, this past Saturday, the 12th of June, from the Eagles Community Arena in Newcastle on DAZN, Jeremias Nicholas Ponce gets the 10th round TKO over Lewis Ritson. Ritson was down 3 times in the 10th round. And then we were talking about how at one point during this fight, Ritson's corner threw in the towel and the referee ignored it. He didn't acknowledge it, and he didn't stop the fight. He let the fight keep going. Ritson ended up still losing, and it was still stopped as a TKO. What do you think about something like that happens? It doesn't happen too often. And when's the last time something like that happened in boxing?
So last time I can remember it happening, I was there at Yankee Stadium. Uri Foreman was fighting Miguel Cotto. Foreman's corner threw in the towel. Arthur McCanty Jr. was refereeing the fight. He threw it out, and it didn't accept it. Foreman actually had a knee injury, which later required surgery, and Arthur, was made to look fairly bad when that came out. And the team felt he couldn't move because of his knee. His defense wasn't what it needed to be, and Uri's not a guy that can stand and trade with somebody like Cotto. I think, the referee, has the discretion to do that, right? That's in the rules of boxing. But, when you're the referee, that the one thing is the corner knows their fighter better than anybody else. And if the corner's watching that fight and they think that he's done, then you accept it and you stop the fight, because the number one job of that referee is to protect the fighters. And if the people who know him best think he's in danger, then you stop the fight. And so I thought that the referee made a big mistake in that fight, should have let it stop. Fortunately, there was no further harm, but, there could have been, right? You just never know what happens in these situations. And, sometimes, you always hear the old saying, I'd rather stop at one punch too early than one punch too late. And that is really accurate in this particular case. I kind of felt like it was a mistake on the ref's part that, if he looks at that tape, he's going to say, I shouldn't have done that.
Kevin, Matchroom Boxing actually released like a behind-the-scenes clip. It's about 2 minutes long. You can find it on their YouTube page, where Steve Gray, the referee, goes into Ritson's changing room and kind of explains his decision about throwing out the towel, which was pretty much down to he felt that Ritson was kind of losing the fight due to body shots, and at that moment in time, he was taking more shots to the head than to the body. But regardless of that, what's your opinion on? Because I know a lot of people kind of want the referees to come out and clarify and justify exactly what they did. Is that something that you're in favor of?
I think so. I think transparency, hey, look, boxing, for whatever reason, and it's sad, has a bad reputation. And a lot of people think it's shady. And there's backroom dealings going on. So if you can clarify and explain exactly why, do it. I always think that that's a good thing. More information rather than less is always better. I don't think there was any ill will intended. I don't think there was any, thing going on there. I just think the referee made a decision. Hey, look, I'll go back to what I said to Danny. I was there at ringside when Pedro Alcazar died in a fight in the ring, and he was getting hit in the midsection. No headshots, but he still died. The corner knows their fighter, and I think you have to look at that. And they know their fighter. They know how he's looking. They've heard him in the corner before. The referee goes and checks on each corner after a round ends, but they're not there the entire time, and the referee can't hear everything, and he doesn't know the fighter like the corners do. So when the corner says, hey, we're looking at our guy and he's had enough, then you accept that and you move on. You say, hey, you know what? Okay, that's enough. And I think, that was ridiculous on the part of Steve's part, that it was a mistake and that I don't think he should have done.
Because not only is Ritson's corner, it's his dad.
Yeah.
So, I'm surprised his dad didn't get in the ring.
Right. I mean, that's the thing. That happened. What fight was it? Tyson and Peter McNeely too. The trainer got in the ring and actually was a disqualification. So that fight was not a knockout; it was a disqualification.
Right.
The trainer got in the ring and the fight hadn't been started. But that's that is kind of the way it is. I mean, when you know your fighter, and that's your number one job as a trainer. I always tell people, the corner's job is to protect their guy. Yeah, you got to do strategy. Yeah, you get up there, but you have that guy's life in your hands. The fighters are warriors. And, and you look at what a magnificent, great fighter Roberto Duran was. And what do we still talk about? Nearly 40 years ago, we talk about no mas, right? I mean, Roberto Duran is no more a quitter than I am, the NBA slam dunk champion. But, he gets branded that, right? And people bring that up to him all the time. And quitting in boxing is just seen as really poor form. And so, the fighter doesn't want to have to do that in front of the world. So they rely on their corners to do that for them. They also put their own safety in the corner's hands. They let the corner knows the work they put in. They know, what their fighter's like when he's solid, when he's not. And I think that's the responsibility of the trainer. And all four people in the corner, but the head trainer is being the number one guy. And so, with Lewis's father being there in the corner, if he says it's enough, it's enough.
With your experience at covering so many, Vegas combat sports events, Kevin, how does somebody like Bob Bennett of the Nevada State Athletic Commission, how does somebody like him address a situation like that? Would he want his referees to, would he tell them hey, if they throw in the towel, stop that fight? Or would he, ultimately give them the full autonomy to make that decision?
Nevada is really good about giving their officials autonomy to do what they think is right. But I think, they have a breakdown, as most good commissions do after the fight. And why did you do what you did? And he had better have a damn good reason why he didn't accept the towel being thrown in. And let's just, play it to the worst possible conclusion. The corner throws the towel in, the referee throws it out, and then 20 seconds later, a tragic punch happens and the fighter passes, right? I mean, I even hate to say that, but if that happens, like, how are you going to defend those actions? You just sat there and you said, hey, the fighter's good to go, and then this tragedy occurs. I mean, this is a sport. It's not a gladiator fight to the death like so many people try to make it. It's a freaking sport. And so I think, Bennett would give the autonomy to the officials to make that decision. And if he felt like they gave him a good answer, then it would be, I think he would back them. But I think that they better have a damn good answer to give him at that post-fight breakup, or their career is going to be in jeopardy.
Yeah, but it's quite a strange decision to do it at all, really, to reject the towel, because the referees are always, it's either you stopped it too soon, you stopped it too late. It's very rare do we ever jump on and say, what a great stoppage. So to have the towel thrown in, it's taken that out of your hands. You can turn around and say, I didn't stop it. The corner stopped it. So for you to grab it and throw it out is kind of very, very strange.
Yeah, no, you're inviting more trouble for yourself, right? I mean, you do, as the referee, want to do the right thing, right? So you want to give the fighter a chance to win, and there's a fine line to walk, right? You want to give them a chance to come back and win. And we've seen fighters, the best fight I ever covered in person, Corrales-Castillo, right? That, Diego Corrales is down twice, just about out on his feet, and he rallies back to win the fight. So you want to give a fighter a chance, but there's a fine line to walk, because you know what the risks are if you go a little bit too far. And it doesn't take a lot, it just takes a little bit. So I think when the corner makes that decision for you, you say, thank you, move on. The fight's over. We're going to move on and fight another day.
Absolutely. Yeah. Also on that card, Thomas Patrick Ward gets the 10-round unanimous decision win over Eddie Valencia. And then Alan the Savage Babbage gets the 3rd-round TK over Damian Chambers. Mike, what do you think about Babbage's performance? That he doesn't stop, man. He just keeps going. Like, I think he's eventually just going to get caught, and he's going to get knocked out just because the way he fights.
He's just there for like entertainment value. Who's kind of like a butterbean on the undercard, where he's just like a Duracell bunny. You just put the batteries in him and off he goes. He just keeps throwing and throwing and throwing, and just that constant pressure and unorthodox style, I think just throws people off because he's just constantly on them. I'm sure Eddie's going to match him really, really well until eventually they have to step him up, and he comes. This gets to a level where people are just too big, too strong, because he's tiny for a heavyweight, and he kept saying. He could be a bridgerweight, a cruiserweight, and a heavyweight because of, how small and light he actually is. But obviously, heavyweight division, heavyweight money. So, if you can do it for a short period of time and, just kind of keep going with that gimmick, you're talking to Alan, and then the next minute you're talking to the Savage, stuff like that is it's humorous. We all enjoy it. He's kind of like the new Dave Allen, I guess, of the Matchroom stable.
Yeah, I could agree with that. Also, this past Saturday from the Virgin Hotels in Las Vegas on ESPN, Shakur Stevenson remains undefeated and gets the 12-round unanimous decision win over Jeremiah Nakatila. This was for the WBO interim super featherweight champion. Kevin, Shakur was getting a lot of criticism after this fight, saying that, he didn't deliver the performance that he needed to. Obviously the word boring gets thrown around, but some fans threw that around, and even some media members from what I've seen. What'd you think about his performance?
I didn't think it was his greatest performance, especially a guy who hadn't fought in a long time, so I was not all that impressed by what he did, but I think Shakur is a special talent. Like he retweeted me today. I had taken him out of my pound for pound top 10.
Yeah, you did.
I had him 9th in my top 10. And I resisted putting Josh Taylor in over him because I said, I told everybody who was arguing with me at the time, I said, I think Shakur is a special fighter, and I believe he's better than Josh Taylor, and he deserved it. But then I saw that performance, and I said, well, wait a minute. Even if I believe down the road that Shakur would beat Josh Taylor, at this moment in time, that performance did not match up to what Josh Taylor did. So I elevated Josh Taylor and I removed Shakur, and I tweeted that out. And Shakur then responded by saying, well, that was quick. But I think I was the only person that had Shakur in my top 10. Most people did not. If I wasn't the only one, I was one of the few that did. But I just kind of thought, he said he didn't feel well. I'll accept that. I don't have any reason to doubt his truth. I didn't think he set the world on fire. It was a guy that he could have probably stopped and finished and gotten rid of. Shakur, I think that's the next level for him. He's got to stop some of these guys because he's outclassing by such a margin. But I would never say boring, because I think that suggests that he could have done something different. You want him to stop people within the confines of what he does. Mm-hmm. And what he does is box and move and create angles and set up punches brilliantly. And I think that, if he just had a little bit more on the gas, he might have done that. But he only got hit, 25 punches, I think it was. It was an incredibly low amount of punches. So how can you complain about a guy that gets out of a 12-round fight and didn't even get hit? Arturo Gatti would get hit that many punches in the first minute of the fight.
Mm-hmm. Kevin, do you think that's just something we're going to have to put up with? Because like you just touched on, it is really Shakur's style. Is hit them and don't get hit. And, for career, legacy, longevity, that's going to work well for him. But just unfortunately, in terms of entertainment, it's not going to be. Or do you think we could see a change in style for Shakur where maybe he gets his man strength later down the line and he may start stopping people?
I think he has the ability to do that. I think he has the ability to do that now within the context of what he does, right? I don't think, you got to go out there and be a slugger and, and be like Deontay Wilder and look to knock somebody's head off with one punch, right? I think, but I think when you hit him with a clean shot, take a step in and throw a combination at him, right? And I think, Shakur would hit him with a clean shot and then, do the dance with him, and then go through his routine and hit him with a clean shot. And I think, that Shakur has the ability, I'm praising Shakur here, he has the ability to throw those extra couple of punches. And if you throw in each combination where you land a clean shot, if you throw 2, 3, 4 more punches after it, sooner or later, the guys are going to start wearing down, and by the end of the fight, you're going to start getting stoppages. He's just not putting enough consistent pressure on, and I think he's quick enough and he's defensively aware enough that he'll know that when he's in the pocket, when it's safe to throw a couple more shots and then get out of the way. Right now, he's throwing the one shot and exiting the pocket and getting out of danger. So I think he can do it, and I think he will do it. And I think he'll probably be back in my top 10 at some point. But like right now, I think Josh Taylor deserved it.
During the telecast, Kevin, Tim Bradley, he every time there's an ESPN card and Tim Bradley's on it, there's always something going on. But Tim Bradley got some attention for saying he didn't agree with the comparisons with the whole Floyd Mayweather thing, and he kind of went against the narrative that people say that ESPN has for Shakur and, trying to compare him to Floyd, which I get it. For like a casual viewer, you connect them to somebody with name recognition like Mayweather, and then they say, oh, well, if ESPN's saying this, it's a marketing technique. We understand that. What'd you think about that when Bradley was saying that, and then that whole situation?
You got to love Tim Bradley, right? Tim Bradley says what he thinks at all times, and it doesn't matter who it is, right? You got to love Tim Bradley for the way, I don't necessarily always agree with everything he says, but God bless that man. There's no statement he won't make. If he believes it, he's going to say it. And, I love him for that. I think the difference between Shakur and Floyd at this stage was Floyd was way more offensive as a young fighter. I think people who think Floyd wasn't an offensive young fighter, go back and watch his fight with Gennaro Hernandez. Watch his fight with Justin Juco. Watch his fight with Diego Corrales, right? Floyd was a very offensive fighter, in those days. Very offensive. He just wasn't a stand in the pocket and get hit guy, but he was a stand in the pocket and hit you guy. And, that's what the game is all about, hit and not be hit. Shakur right now doesn't have the offense that I think, his skills suggest he should have. And so I don't think the comparison is apt. As Floyd got older in his career and got richer, he was less concerned about looking good and beating people up, and he was more concerned with making money and preserving himself. And so he took less and less chances. He still fought a lot of really good fighters down in the stretch of his career, but it wasn't as exciting as it was in the early stages of his career. But I think it's reversed with Shakur. Now Shakur doesn't have that offense now, but it may come along down the road.
So Shakur, after the fight, he said he'd prefer a fight with Oscar Valdez, a unification fight with Valdez, but it looks like it'll be like the Jamel Herring. Jamel Herring, I think, posted on Twitter or something in regards to nothing. Him being overlooked doesn't bother him. He gets it, but he's just there to do his thing. Do you think that out of all those three guys, the last man standing will be Shakur Stevenson?
I do. I just think he's that special of a talent, right? This wasn't his best performance, and so he still won. He still only got hit 25 times in a 12-round fight. He won every round running away. And I think, when he respects who he's fighting and he knows how good Jamel is, he knows how good Oscar is, you're going to see his level go up. He has a great camp, spars with really good people. And I like Shakur. I think, I think it tells you something that Valdez's people are not so interested in fighting him right now. I think Oscar would like to fight him, and I think Shakur would like to fight Oscar, but I think when you get the business side in, they're like, well, let's wait a little bit. And that's telling, right? If they thought that, Shakur, they were going to tear through Shakur and, hey, I was wrong. I thought that Burchelt would beat Oscar Valdez because I thought, Oscar would be in the fight early and then Burchelt's physicality and his size and eventually his power would wear Oscar down and he would, the fight would turn toward him down the stretch. Oscar really looked good in that fight, but even despite that, his team was like, okay, we'll take another fight, and then we'll come back to, Shakur down the road. That tells you volumes, right? That they didn't want that fight right now because they know how good Shakur is, and they know how difficult it's going to be for their guy to beat him.
Also on that card, the sniper Jose Pedraza gets the 29th win of his career as he gives the first professional loss to Julian Rodriguez. Kevin, Pedraza seems like he goes up and down. He obviously has talent. Mike and I were talking about this the other day, but I still think that Pedraza is still the most significant win of somebody like Tank Davis's career.
Yeah,
it's held up well. Where is Jose Pedraza after this win? Because at one point he's put in there for somebody to get the win, and he's a good name on a resume. And now he comes in this past weekend, he beats an undefeated guy. What's your take on that?
I think he's just he's a hair down from the top level. Like he's one of those guys that, he's a baseball player that can hit the ball out of the park. He's a good defensive player. He has all the tools, but he doesn't show them often enough, right? And so there's just a couple guys better than him out there. I agree with you. When you first mentioned his name, the first thing I thought of was the Tank Davis fight. I actually thought Pedraza was going to win that fight. I thought going into that fight, Pedraza was a guy that, had not fulfill the potential that he had of him, but then, was just starting to come into his own. And I thought Pedraza would be able to, and I was really impressed with Tank Davis, how he took him apart and beat him in that fight. But Pedraza is one of the better fighters out there. He's fighting in weight classes, where there's a lot of really elite guys. And I think that at the end of the day, there's classes where if he was in that class with the skill he has now, he'd be a champion and making a lot more money than he's making. But I think, he's just in a class where he's missing out on greatness because there's some great guys around him.
Kevin, was there any truth to the rumor that, Pedraza won, Teofimo Lopez won, that Top Rank were going to put those two together towards the end of the year?
I mean, that was a fight that they had tried to put together before, and so I think that was something. Obviously now with Teofimo testing positive for COVID and pulling out of the fight, that's probably not going to happen because Lord only knows when. Teofimo is going to come back in August, so when does he come back after that? Is going to be the question. But yeah, that was a fight that they looked at, that they thought about making. I was against it, and I expressed my feeling because I said, you have those elite guys there, and let's make a fight with one of them. Let's make a fight with a Devin Haney who called him out after the last fight. Let's make a fight with Ryan Davis. Let's make a fight with Tank, right? And I so I wasn't into it, but I know Top Rank, it's easier to do business in house, and that was a fight that they could put together easily, and I think that's what they were looking to do. So yes to the fact that they were looking to do it, but I think it's kind of run its course at this stage, at least for now.
Right. Yeah, that's what I was going to say, at least for now. Rounding off this card, Xander Zayas, a young Xander Zayas, gets the 9th win of his career with the 3rd round TK over Larry Friars. What do you think about Xander's potential, Kevin?
I like Xander. He's kind of perplexing in this. Like when you look at him, you say, what is it that he does well? He's really fundamentally sound, but there's nothing like he blows you away with. Like you look at Shakur and, you see his quickness and you see his footwork and his intuition for boxing. There's so many guys that have that. Some guys, Teofimo when he was coming up, his power, you saw him hit guys and what would happen to them. What does Xander do well, right? Like, is he this great boxer? Is he this big puncher? Is he this really smart tactician in the ring? What is he? Now, I think, he's a tough guy to judge, because, many scouts have gotten fired and many general managers have gotten fired trying to predict what an 18-year-old was going to do when they got to the major leagues or to the NFL or whatever, NBA, they're very unpredictable. And, he's in that age group, right? I think if I'm not mistaken, he's still 18, going to be 19, but he could be 19 now. But either way, he's still a young guy that's projectable. He's got a big frame. So I think he has potential to do something. Is he going to be a special fighter? I would be pretty solid saying no. But when I say special fighter, I mean like pound for pound guy, long reigning, multiple weight champion. I don't think that's him. Will Xander be a world champion someday? I would bet that Xander will win a belt. I would bet that. I think he's good enough to win a belt. And if even in a diluted era like this, you win a belt, you're a good fighter. You're a really good fighter. There's very few guys that I would say that have won a belt that weren't good fighters. There were a couple, we get some guys in there sometimes, but I would say for the most part, Xander Zayas is going to be a world champion. And I think that says a lot about him.
And this upcoming Saturday, the 19th of June, again, from the Virgin Hotels in Las Vegas on ESPN, Naoya Inoue, 20-0, goes up against Michaeldas Marines. I hope I said that right. This is for Inoue's WBA and IBF bantamweight world titles. What's your overall take on the monster Inoue, Kevin, and what do you think about this matchup?
I love him. I mean, I think Michaeldas Marines is in for a stomach ache sometime late Saturday night because he's going to eat a body shot that he's not going to want to eat. And good night, Irene. He's going to be out of there. Can he make 6 rounds? I doubt it. Right. I think Jason Maloney is a better, more professional, solid fighter than he is. And Jason Maloney went out, I believe, the 4th round. And Inoue is a really complete fighter. One of the, I have him 3rd in my pound for pound list. You can make an argument that he's number 1. I think what Canelo has been doing, I think is pretty tough to put Inoue up over the top of him. But, you can make that argument because he is that talented. He is a dynamic, amazing fighter, and huge things are ahead of him. He's already accomplished huge things. The only sad point is, we're going to have John Real Casimero sitting at ringside. We're going to have Nonito Donaire sitting at ringside and Inoue in the ring, but they're not going to be fighting each other. That's the bad part. I wish that maybe John Real was in there and we would see that fight. That would be a fight. And as would a rematch with Nonito Donaire. But it's boxing.
You kind of just touched on what I was going to say. So, Kevin, will we see Nonito Donaire in Inoue too?
I asked Noya that yesterday. He said yes. He said, I want to win all the belts, and if he has the championship, I will fight him. I interviewed Nonito after his win a couple of weeks ago, Rubali, and that's the fight he wants. So I think that's the fight that, both sides are targeting. So is it going to be the absolute next fight? I would bet against that, but I think he said he wants to fight Donaire. Donaire's, I think, 38 years old, so not a lot of time. You got to get it off fairly quickly, to be fair to him. So I do think it's going to happen.
I mean, that would be the money fight to make in that division, wouldn't it? Would against Nonito? I mean, with Nonito's experience and resume over the last several years he's been in boxing, him being at that weight class with somebody like the monster he's already faced before, that would be the biggest money fight to make, right?
100%. I mean, while I think Casemiro would be a good technical, fun fight, I don't think it's got the money behind it that a Donaire fight would. And, you're talking, hey, let's be honest, Noya is going to be a Hall of Famer, right? He's still young in his career, but look what he's done already. And, we know he's going to do more. But what more can Nonito Donaire do? I mean, he is a Hall of Famer too. It's just he needs to retire so we can vote him in. And, so you're going to put two Hall of Fame fighters, with a lot of world championships and a lot of knockouts and a lot of wins in against each other. And so to me, that's a fight. And plus, they could show the highlights of that fight they had in the World Boxing Super Series, which, if you watch a highlight package from that, you're going, you understand why I got up at 4 a.m. to watch it, or 3 a.m, whatever the hell it was. It was way too early for me, believe me.
And you don't want to risk it. You don't want to put Nonito in there with somebody else and for that night, he couldn't roll back the years again. Whereas if you're sticking in with Inoue, he comes out with a career best performance, beats him. We then get Nonito Donaire Inoue 3. What more could you ask for? Or if he does lose to Inoue, then thanks for everything. Sail off into the sunset.
I totally agree with you. I mean, timing is everything in boxing. You want to get the fights at the right time, especially at these weight classes where the guys don't have opportunity, Michael, to make that big money, right? They're going to get big money for that fight. And take the opportunity while you have it, because you don't, like you say, you don't want to let something happen. We saw Nonito got COVID once, right? Who knows? Like any weird thing can happen that can put this off. So if you got the chance to make the fight, make the fight.
It doesn't need that popular boxing phrase. It doesn't need to marinade.
Do you know where that marinade phrase came from? We know it was Mr. Bob Arum, but really? that was Madison Square Garden. I was there, and Jose, the Puerto Rican kid Lopez that had the belt. What was his name? And Stephen Luevno had fought, and then they wanted to make Gamboa versus Lopez. Why am I forgetting Lopez's first name? Juanma Lopez.
Okay, yeah.
And so that was a fight that everybody was really hot on to see, Gamboa versus Juanma. And Arum said after he beat Stephen Luevno, we got to let this thing marinate a little bit, right? And that's where that line came from. And the worst line he ever uttered. Bob said a lot of really good things over the years, but that was not one of the better ones. And I think he regrets it. But you know what? I'll say this. Like, I wrote this a couple of weeks ago when the day that Fury and Joshua were signed, and however briefly it looked like we had that unification bout up. Look at all the unification bouts that are up and have taken place or upcoming in boxing this year. That's the one thing we used to always rip the sport. We said, if they make the big fights, the sport will thrive. And all of a sudden, they're kind of almost sneaking up on us. They're making those fights. We had the 140-pound unification fight. Teofimo Lopez, the undisputed champion, he's going to defend his belt. It'll be an undisputed there. I do think, at some point the heavyweight division is going to be unified now. We're seeing that. So we have it, starting to come together. We're talking about Inoue and Donaire potentially fighting, which would be a huge, huge fight. A lot of, if they're not all 4 belts, 2 or 3 of the belts going together, I think that makes boxing a lot better and a lot more compelling. And so I think we have a lot to look forward to in the next 6 to 9 months to a year.
It's just human nature, Kevin. We're never happy and we love to complain.
I never want to complain. Complain's not the right word. What I want to do, like, I want to point out the mistakes so that they fix them, because I love this sport and I love it when I'm sitting there watching some of the high level fights that I've watched over the years, and you just tingle and you're going like, I remember saying to a reporter, one of the few reporters that was there that was on the beat longer than me, when Mayweather and Pacquiao fought, I said, can you freaking believe we're here doing this? We're sitting here at this moment, 10 feet from that ring, and this major fight. I love the sport, right? So when I criticize it, it's not because I'm not satisfied. I want it to be better. But what I try to do, and I've done, like, and I mentioned that Fury Joshua column I wrote, I want to point out when the right thing happens, because when they do the right thing, they deserve to be praised for it. And then, say, hey, you know what? We asked you to do this. You're doing it. We're gonna follow up with what we said and give you coverage and support commensurate with the significance of the fight.
Also, this upcoming Saturday from the Toyota Center in Houston, Texas, on Showtime, Jermall Charlo puts up his WBC middleweight world title against Juan Macias Montiel. What do you think about this matchup, Kevin?
I think you look at it, and Jaime Munguia knocked out Montiel. Montiel's coming off a win over James Kirkland. Does knocking out Kirkland get you a shot at the middleweight championship? I guess in this world it does, right? But there's Charlo's minus 3,300 to win, as is Naoya Inoue, and Michaela Mayer, who's on that undercard, is minus 4,000. So we have these massive, favorites. So you got to bet the fights aren't going to go the distance. To me, that's the only way I think you can bet. I think Charlo is a pretty good finisher. You're going to have a guy that's going to get in his face and try to, finish him. So I think Charlo is the better bet to not get hit, and so I think Charlo will finish him.
What do you think is the first? I mean, I'm obviously assuming Charlo gets the W this upcoming Saturday. Who do you think is the first significant name that Charlo can get in the middleweight division?
God, isn't it bizarre? Because, Gennady Golovkin is going to fight Murata, and he's not fighting till New Year's Eve. I mean, what the hell is that? I don't understand it. And it's not like Murata is like some big fight for him, but for some reason that's he's going that direction, and I say boo to you, Gennady. I don't know what you're doing that. I think that's really bad management, to be honest with you. I think that's short-sighted. If you want to fight that fight, take another fight, put that fight up sooner and fight something else. But to wait till the end of the year, does he fight Demetrius Andrade? I mean, I just think, it's really weird. There's, Eddie Hearn made a compelling case to make these matchups, right? And this is one of them. Andrade is a guy that people are avoiding. Neither he nor Charlo have anywhere to go right now. Why not make that fight and see who's better? I think that's the fight to make. Because poor Jermall, what's he going to do? There's nobody out there that, makes sense for him. But business, I'll tell you, this business sometimes.
Exactly. And then also, I'm sure some of our listeners are going to hate that we mentioned this, but it's another novelty event on Bain Sports from the Estadio Jalisco in Mexico. Julio Cesar Chavez Jr., the son of the legend, goes up against the MMA legend Anderson Silva. We're not going to ask you to give us your prediction on this fight, but what's your take on Chavez Jr. coming in and Anderson Silva coming from the MMA world to get a piece of this pie?
You could have asked me what I thought of Hector Camacho and Julio Sr. So I guess you're doing me a favor by not asking me that, because I would have to insult Julio Sr. and I don't want to do that. So
exactly.
It's just bizarre. Like, what is the freaking point? And Anderson wants to fight. Anderson's a great guy. And he was at one point in his career many years ago a great MMA fighter. Boxing and MMA are not the same sports. They're different sports. And for boxing fans who don't understand MMA, the reason that they look similar an MMA fighter has to defend takedowns. He has to defend submissions. He has to defend kicks and knees and elbows, none of which a boxer has to defend. So they train differently. They take different stances. Their punches come from different angles. They set things up differently. So when you hear MMA fighters talk about boxing, it's not the boxing that we're talking about. It's MMA boxing, which is different. And I don't understand why people keep going to that well over and over. I mean, Chavez is so freaking messed up that who knows how he's going to come in. But if he's even anything remotely close to himself, he should blow Anderson Silva out of the water. If he doesn't, then check the drug test on Julio, because something got to be going on, right? I mean, Anderson Silva has no right being even remotely close with Julio Cesar Chavez in this fight.
Kevin, on BoxRec, Anderson's listed as 1-1 as an actual pro record. You know anything about his previous fights?
No, they were long ago, and I don't. So I think if I'm not mistaken, both fights were in Brazil. Right. And Anderson being a hero in Brazil, I'm having a feeling that he would probably not fighting anybody of too much significance. But I don't know anything about his opponents.
Yeah, we definitely have to get used to these types of events because they seem like they're happening more and more.
That's one more, Dan. So after this, I know for many, many years, Anderson Silva and Roy Jones Jr. have talked about doing a fight. Is that still in the background, Kevin? Is this like a pre-fight before we get Roy Jones coming back? Because I know Roy Jones is going back and forth with Carl Froch.
Well, if Anderson gets knocked out, I think there's no real hope of it, right? I just think this craze is going to kind of wither away, right? Because people are going to get tired of it. So do they get it made before it withers away, or do they wait too long and then they lose their opportunity? I think, after the Jake Paul Woodley fight, I think that's going to be a turning point, because we'll know something one way or the other. If Jake Paul beats Woodley, which he could do, right? If he beats Woodley, then we say, okay, he's proven his point, right? We get it. He fought a guy that, was a decent MMA fighter, just recently retired, just recently had a good fight, and he beat him. But if Tyron knocks him out, that'll also prove a point too. And I think that who is the fan base for Jake Paul? Because he's the A side here, and it's the people that follow him on YouTube, and it's the curious that don't really follow boxing but have heard of him and heard of the controversy surrounding him. And I think eventually those aren't the people that are going to support the sport. They're going to go away, and I think that may happen whatever happens after that fight.
Kevin, so say if Jake Paul does beat Tyron Woodley, obviously he's beating Tyron Woodley, not in Tyron Woodley's chosen sport. Obviously he's an MMA fighter, and like you touched on, it's a different type of fighting. But do you think it still looks bad on the MMA world that he lost to a YouTuber?
No, because what would happen if he went into a, MMA fight, right? I mean, he would get, it was the same thing. Like when Mayweather fought McGregor, I wrote this before the fight, said if it was a MMA fight, Conor McGregor would win it in 45 seconds. Floyd Mayweather would be a bloody pulp. I said, but it's going to be a boxing match, and Floyd Mayweather will destroy him in the boxing match, because it's like baseball and softball. They're different sports, and just because you're a good hitter in softball, you're not going to go in there and win the major league batting title, right? I think that's kind of what we're talking about here. And so I don't think it really affects MMA too much. I think for people who don't follow MMA, or some boxing fans who like to dump on MMA, they're going to use it as that kind of, fuel. Look what we did. But I don't think it's really a great accomplishment. It's not proven anything.
As we round off the episode for this week here on the last round, Kevin, we touched on this earlier. You mentioned it earlier. Teofimo Lopez was supposed to fight this upcoming weekend on Triller, defending his 135-pound titles against George Kambosos, has tested positive for COVID-19. And the whole entire event actually has been rescheduled for, I believe, sometime in mid-August. What was your reaction when you heard that news this morning?
Really disappointed, for Teofimo, because I know, he wanted to put this show on, be the star in the show, and then go into fighting a serious opponent. I don't mean that. That sounds like I'm dissing Kambosos, and I'm not. I think he's better than a normal mandatory, but I think Teofimo was a minus 2,500 favorite for a reason. I felt sad for Teofimo because I think he was going to go out there and make a call out after the fight of one of the top lightweights and want to get it on, and he loses that opportunity. And as a boxing fan, I was disappointed for one reason: Jim Lampley's return, and we get to see Jim Lampley calling a fight again. That's going to be pushed back. So those two reasons, I felt bad.
Kevin, I think I'm right in saying in one of the previous episodes you were on, you said you were good at judging how a pay-per-view is going to do. Obviously, this has been moved back to August, and me and Danny were chatting the other day. With the amount of money, the $6 billion, pot that they put down just for the Teofimo Lopez and Kambosos fight, and the fact that they haven't, relied upon nostalgia on this one with someone like I think it was supposed to be like a Mike Tyson against Evander Holyfield until they fell out with Triller for whatever reason. How do you think this will do on the pay-per-view? Because they're gonna have to be looking at very substantial numbers to break even or turn a profit on this.
I think if the fight had happened on this weekend, they would have been lucky to break 50,000. It would have been a terrible pay-per-view. Look at the competition in the U.S. that they would have had that night. You're going to have a UFC fight going on, and there's not a lot of crossover, but there's about 10 to 15%, which is an incredible fight that UFC has going on. Then you're going to have Noyanaway, pound for pound, on a lot of people's list, on ESPN, free TV. Jamal Charlo defending the middleweight title on Showtime, not free TV, but a lot of people have Showtime, and the fight was out there. You got Jaime Munguia fighting on DAZN. That's going to be a interesting fight, and then you have that Chavez farce in Mexico, and the people that might have bought Lopez, right, are going to be Chavez fans, right, and they're going to, so they would have probably bought Chavez over Lopez. I think this weekend it would have been terrible. The fight's going to be on August 14th. I don't know yet what else is going to be on August 14th. I don't think it's going to do. Pay-per-view is sold by name recognition, kind of just like in politics. If you know my name, you might vote for me. Nobody knows who the hell Kambosos is, and remember that the hardcore boxing fan base, which we would be, is less than 2% of the entire base that's potentially looking at a pay-per-view number. So it's the hardcore base, which is going to buy it, is a really small number. So now we're going to, be looking at the casual fan. They barely know who Teofimo is. He beat Loma, and that's like he's starting to creep through and get out and get into the sunshine where people can see him and know him. And now you're putting them on pay-per-view. I think that was the wrong way to go. And that fight would have, I don't think it's going to do big business in any event, but certainly would have done terrible this weekend.
So do we say it out loud? So is it a good coincidence that he got COVID and the fight got moved to a weekend where it may make more pay-per-views?
Yeah, I wish I knew what fights were going to be on that weekend, but I think nobody at Triller is going to complain too much that it got moved, because now they have a chance to reset and try to get the night more to themselves than they would have had otherwise. And my guess is that they won't go back to Miami. I was hearing there were no tickets being sold down there for that show. So they'll probably most likely go to Las Vegas, would be my guess what they do, and have Teofimo go on there. So I think it might have been a good unfortunate thing that happened.
Moving swiftly on.
Yeah.
Kevin, Teofimo Lopez was on the 3 knockdown roll with Mario Lopez and Steve Kim earlier this week. And they had asked him, because he had just renegotiated a contract with Top Rank. It seems like he's going to be with them for a couple years more. And it was interesting. I believe Steve Kim had asked him, like, what's your relationship with Top Rank? Is it good now since you did kind of resign? You're staying long term. And I believe he said that he has a relationship with ESPN, and that's how he answered it. he kind of dodged it. So he pretty much implying that him and Top Rank still aren't really on the best of terms. It's business, but he has a relationship with ESPN. Have you heard anything about that situation and his new contract?
I did. Well, before his contract was done, I actually had done an interview with him. And if you watched my interview with him, he said in that interview, I asked him about Top Rank. He said, we're talking. And so that was in the stage when the negotiations were going on. We're talking. I think things are working out. I'm happy that, that it's going on. And my sense was, similar that, ESPN invested a lot in that fight that he had with Lomachenko. And so he loved the fact that, his mug was on ESPN for weeks at a time, and all the promotion and everything that went into that fight. And they took him seriously as an elite fighter. So I think that, he feels like that's his home, and that's where he's going to make the most money. I don't think there's negative feelings with Top Rank. Certainly, maybe a little harsher toward Bob than say Todd. Bob tends to get cranky, and at 90 years old, he has no filter, so he says whatever he wants to say. And sometimes, to a proud young fighter who hasn't been through the wars like Bob has. I remember when I was a young reporter, the first time I got yelled at by Bob, like, oh my God, what am I going to ever do? And then I've had screaming matches with Bob, like where we're just, MFing each other and going at it. And the very next day, it's like, nothing ever happened, right? So you live and you learn. And Teofimo hasn't had the chance to go through that. So I think he might feel a little hard feelings toward Bob, but toward the staff and toward Todd DeBuff, the company president, I don't think he has a negative feeling.
Kevin, do you think it was actually it's going to look back as a negative, the fact that huge deal with Triller, because I'm sure Teofimo's probably started off on, 50,000, 100,000, 500,000, and nobody wants to work backwards. So the fact that he's got this 4 million pot from the Triller deal, he now thinks, well, that's my pay mark. That's right. Where I'm at. Where in reality, when he goes back to Top Rank, it's not going to be that. I'm sure it's probably not going to be anywhere near that, because, like you said, he doesn't have that name recognition. He's not moving the needle, Floyd Mayweather style. So do you think it's going to kind of backfire on him, this huge deal?
I think he's a smart guy, and I think as he thought about it and as he talked to people in his universe, they pointed out to him, hey, look, Triller's probably going to lose a lot of money. We got lucky. They worked the system really well. We got lucky that Triller bid this much over. I mean, hey, look, Eddie Hearn bid a significant amount more than Top Rank did, right? Yeah. I mean, what was it, 3.5 million, and Top Rank did 2.3 million. So, Eddie Hearn bid a significant amount, 50% more than Top Rank's offer, right? I mean, so, that was really, but I think Teofimo realized, hey, you know what? Triller's probably going to lose a ton of money on this show. So, go back to Top Rank and get back in there. If he takes the fights, and this is what I will say, Top Rank has the fights that he wants. You don't want to be in a situation like Bud Crawford's in, where you got to go somewhere else and they have all the fights. They can put him in there with all the guys in the different weight classes. They have a lot of guys in all those classes, and they have the super lightweight champion and Josh Taylor that they can put him in with. There's a lot of intriguing fights for him, and the fighters that they don't have, Devin Haney, Ryan Garcia, notably Tank Davis to a third degree, they're reasonable. Top Rank is doing business with their promoters.
Kevin, what do you know about Triller? Because obviously when they hit the scene, we thought they were going to be, bands, nostalgia, with a little bit of boxing thrown in. But, with this card actually being delayed, but, it was supposed to be this weekend, there was no nostalgia. It looked like they were just trying to be a normal, everyday boxing entity. Is that something that you've heard?
Yeah, I wrote about that. I talked to Ryan Kavanaugh, the CEO of Triller, and, I think there's a couple issues that went on here. They got into deep water with Tyson and Roy. They have legal disputes with both of them. Then Jake Paul left them to go to Showtime. So now they're sitting there without any, I don't think Roy was the draw, but Mike was a huge draw. Jake Paul was a draw, much less than Mike, but Jake was a draw as well. And now you're sitting here and you're looking at it and you're going, okay, we got this money, but what do we do? And so I think that, they made this conscious decision. Let's try to see if this thing works with real boxing, and to go out there and say, we're going to put on a legitimate show. And I even told Peter Kahn, the president of boxing, I said, you couldn't help yourself. You had to throw that Vitor Belfort fight in there against Tarzan at the last minute, right? Like you just couldn't help yourself, and you had a good card and you had to mess it up with that. But, I think that they decided, hey, let's see if we can make a business out of this with real fights, because there would be a way for them then to exist. I think they struggle right now to exist long term because they don't have any fighters under contract. And it's going to take a long time to build up a stable. But if you can cherry pick fights and purse bids, now there's not a lot of attractive purse bids out there usually. They're not attractive fights. You don't often get a guy that's a pound for pound champion in a purse bid like they did. My list, Teofimo is number 5. But I think that they're trying to see how they do in boxing with a normal card and how that reacted to what they did with for the lack of a better term, celebrity cards.
Also, actually, last Thursday in her MMA debut, Claressa Shields scored a TKO, actually, in PFL MMA with your MMA background as well. Kevin, what'd you think about Claressa Shields making the move and getting the win?
I think a historic move for her to go over and try it. I mean, you're talking about, a highly decorated boxer. Amanda Serrano did not get the attention that she did. Amanda Serrano, also one of the best female boxers in the world, maybe better than Claressa. She did not get the attention that Claressa did. But I think, Claressa, you can argue, undisputed in multiple weights, was the best boxer to ever do that, to make the move over. I didn't think she was fighting basically a warm body in Brittany Elkins, and she struggled in the first 2 rounds, almost was submitted. And, but, that's not a surprise. It's what we said before. They're different sports, right? And, had she fought anybody with a Paul, she would have lost. I think the PFL was shocked. The ratings were terrible. Really? It peaked at 101,000, which, I would have thought, they were averaging 199 in their first couple shows, and then they peak at 101 for that fight. So that to me, made it was like, what the hell was that? It was like the public rejected her for some reason. I'm not sure. I don't know if it was Brittany Elkin. She was a little bit known to the MMA public, so maybe that's what it was. I think Claressa, I give her a lot of credit for doing what she's trying to do. She's trying to make a big purse, and she's trying to create opportunities for herself and other women. I'm not sure this is the path that's going to work for her, but, she's butting into a brick wall in boxing. I don't understand why, women's boxing isn't doing better on the TV ratings, because there are usually so many exciting fights that they put on. And then, it seems like the people just don't want to see them, at least in the U.S., right? I think in other parts of the world, it's different. But in the U.S., women's boxing just cannot catch on. And it now appears like that was the case with her when she moved over to MMA on the ratings.
Do you think it will, though, Kevin? From your experience, how long did it take for the women's fighters in the UFC to catch on?
Immediately. As soon as Ronda Rousey came in, boom, it was on. Now I think, they had some special circumstances, Ronda was the Olympian, Miesha Tate, there was a born rivalry with the two of them. They came in, both pretty women, the guys liked, and all that. And I think it created, but they could fight, right? And they were both good fighters. And so the women were big right away. UFC was headlining women, forget Ronda headlining that first show against Liz Carmouche, but they headlined women right off the bat, and the public accepted it, right? They accepted it, and they, as good fighters. In boxing, I just don't get it, right? It didn't. I think there's a couple reasons to it. Finishing, I think, is a big thing, right? If you look at most women's fights, there's no finishes. I think a small part of the excuse is they fight 2-minute rounds. If you get somebody, you set up somebody and you get into that last part, and all of a sudden you get them in trouble. And then the bell rings, you're out, right? And you don't have the chance to finish. And I think that is something about it. But I think the level of athlete has to improve, and start to get more of those finishes. Amanda Serrano is one that can punch. She's a legit puncher. People like finishes, and you just don't see that in women's boxing to a large degree. I think that's, for whatever reason, is a flaw. It's not a flaw to me, but it's a flaw to the people who in the U.S. who aren't watching it, right? Because they just don't like it, for whatever reason. I think you need to get a dynamic personality who has talent and has that punching power that, like if you took the Teofimo Lopez and it was a woman and she was just like Teofimo Lopez was coming up, I think that might turn it around. But you look at Michaela Mayers fighting this weekend, and what is she, 14-0 with 4 knockouts, I think it is. And, they don't have that finishing power. And so the public just isn't latching on to them.
And our concluding topic of this week's episode, Kevin, the 41-year-old Russian heavyweight Alexander Povetkin just recently announced his retirement from the sport of boxing. What's your retrospect on the career of Alexander Povetkin now that he's announced his retirement?
I think, he's going to be remembered as a very good fighter, one of the best fighters of his day, whose career was marred by juicing. He had a couple, positive tests, and that's going to hurt his overall. When you look at his overall career, if you have one positive test, you can make an excuse for it. You have multiple positive tests, and then all of a sudden it's like, wait a minute, and then if you have 3, you're kind of like Big Baby Miller, right? And then it's like, so I kind of feel like, he's going to go down remembered well, Olympic gold medalist, world champion, pretty much fought everybody there was to fight, a good to very good fighter, but not great.
Yeah, he did fight pretty much everybody within the last 10, 15 years. I feel like he was in with all the big money heavyweights at one point or another. Definitely. But Kevin Iole of Yahoo Sports, once again, we always thank you for your valuable time here on The Last Round. Once again, before we let you go ahead and tell our listeners where they can find you online and everywhere else.
Well, definitely follow me on Twitter at Kevin I, Kevini. On Instagram at Kevin Iole, Keviniole. I just warned you on Instagram, a lot of Golden Knights pictures this time of year. So you got to like hockey to follow me on Instagram at this time of year, because I'm a Golden Knights fan and rooting them to the Stanley Cup.
They play tomorrow, right?
There we play Montreal in Game 2 tomorrow, so I'll be there. I got season tickets, so I'm stuck. I got to go. But then of course at Yahoo Sports, if you click on my name on any store, you'll find a list of my archive. You can read everything I wrote. Sweet,
Mike. Before as we sign off here, go ahead and let our listeners know where they can find us.
We're at The Last Round 12 on Instagram and Twitter. And obviously, be sure to join us next week. We'll be reviewing the Inoue fight, the Charlo fight, and then looking forward to the Julio Cesar Martinez fight and Lomachenko against Nakatani.
Absolutely. And remember, guys, we have some T-shirts and some sweaters available on the Fit Warrior brand site, Fit Warrior brand website. I'm sorry. Check it out. Support us. We sold a couple, I think, in the UK last week. So whoever bought those in the UK last week, we appreciate your support. So for our guest of the week, and Kevin Iole of Yahoo Sports, for my co-host Michael Shepard, I'm Danny Z. This is The Last Round.
Thanks for supporting and listening to the show. Follow us at The Last Round 12 on social media. Rate, review, and subscribe. This is The Last Round Podcast.
What?